Hello.
Hello and welcome back again. I'm Candace.
And I'm Belle.
And welcome back to our Closing the Early Literacy Gap podcast.
Yes, this podcast is for anyone who has anything to do with small children or even anybody who's in the early stages of learning literacy or learning how to read.
Yep.
So
parents, teachers, administration,
people who train teachers, coaches, anybody. Okay. So we're excited to be back. This is episode 5, the big 5.
Yes.
Today we're going to talk about, we had to do the big 5 on our episode 5.
Absolutely.
So many of you may have heard of the big 5 or maybe you have no idea what we're talking about when we say the big 5.
Let's dive in.
Let's dive in. Yeah. Big 5. Sometimes people will refer to this. This is the big 5, the 5 main important things that are needed for kids learning how to read.
Yes.
And this is based off of the National Reading Panel.
And just explain to them exactly what the National Reading Panel is.
Okay. So the National Reading Panel is a panel of educators and researchers that were tasked by Congress in 1997 to evaluate existing research and evidence to find the best ways to teach children how to read. So it wasn't actually a research study that they did, but what they did was they found all the research, and they spent like 2 or 3 years
just
scouring through it, compiling it, looking at it to try to find out what the best methods are for learning how to read. And their complete report came out in the year 2000, and you can find that at nichd.nih.gov. That's from the National Institute of Child Health. So you can find the whole thing. It's like 400 something pages, but we will summarize it for you right here.
You're welcome.
Yes. So what did they find about, what's the 5?
Okay.
The 5.
So they determined that there are 5 essential parts of learning to read. And they're often, like Belle said, called the big 5. They're phonemic awareness, which is the ability to recognize and manipulate the spoken parts of a word, onset rhymes, sounds, and the individual phonemes of each word. Mm-hmm. The next one, number 2, is phonics. The letter sounds matched with the graphemes or the picture of the letter.
Right. So a lot of people get those two mixed up, phonemic awareness and phonics. They're two separate themes in the big 5. And the difference is that with phonics, you have letters, where phonemic awareness is just the sounds and understanding them and hearing them.
Yes. So you said to me earlier that you can do phonemic awareness in the dark because you don't have to be able to see anything to do phonemic awareness. That's mostly auditory.
You'll hear people say that.
Yes. Number 3 is fluency, the ability to read with accuracy, speed, and proper expression.
I think that one's really important, the proper expression, because there's a lot of places where I know even at our school, we see kids that are just trying to read as fast as they can.
Yes.
So they can get high scores on the test. And there's no way to really measure prosody.
Yes.
Or prosody is a word that means it's expression. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not really a way to measure it. And so because sometimes we're so focused on measuring, that doesn't get measured and that doesn't get emphasized. But who wants to listen to somebody who can't read with prosody?
Absolutely. Who wants to listen to a podcast where you don't have prosody?
Like this, the monotone.
Yeah.
Speaking.
Nobody likes
that.
So after fluency, number 4 is vocabulary, which is knowledge of words' meaning, their use, the structure, and how words link to other words. And this is by far my favorite one.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a really important one.
And
lastly is comprehension, which of course is the ability to read text and understand its meaning. And that's a big one. We're gonna dive into each of these just in a little bit more detail right now. So, but let's just review them again. The big 5 are phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. So something that I read in the Letters manual when we were doing letters shocked me. Yes. And it actually makes sense based on a couple of episodes we talked about how teachers are not really learning the basics of learning how to read. So in the Letters manual, there's this quote. It's on page 6 in the first manual. It says, the NCTQ, which stands for the National Council on Teacher Quality, reviewed over 1,000 teacher training institutes that offer courses in reading instruction. So that would be like our universities that teach teachers how to teach, just anyone that's teaching teachers how to teach. So over 1,000 of these kind of institutions they reviewed, and only 29% of the institutions required coursework pertaining to at least 4 of the big 5. only 29%. And the majority of the schools, 59%, addressed only two or fewer. So it could have been 0 or 1. Didn't even address these components. So when we say, and when we said in that podcast that teacher training is a big problem, this right here is evidence.
It is. And I can attest to that it's such a disservice because I wasn't taught these things.
Yeah.
I remember learning so much when I went through the Letrs training that blew my mind.
Yeah.
Like there's some stuff that comes to me naturally where I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to add this. I'm going to.
Because you naturally have a great feedback loop with the kids where you can see what the kids need and do it. But not all teachers
have that. And not all teachers know how to implement things.
And even if you have it, if you don't, you have to have some knowledge to refine it.
Right. And it's not given to these teachers and it's our job.
Right. Now, in all fairness, I graduated from college in 1996. That was before the National Reading Panel was even put together.
Okay, true.
But I think one of the reasons they did that is because us teachers weren't learning the things that we needed. And I can attest that I didn't learn the things that I needed. So let's get into the Big Five a little bit more detail.
Okay.
But let's just say this. These things are not taught in isolation, or it's not like you should teach phonemic awareness first and then phonics. They should all 5 be taught
simultaneously. But you taught me a new word.
Interleaving.
Interleaving.
Right. You interleave them. It's like interweaving them together all together. So you're teaching and you're like, you teach something and then you bring it back up and you bring it back up and you bring it back up.
So just, to throw it out there, that would be a great word to teach your child because how intelligent would they sound using the word interleaving?
Yeah, that's the perfect example of vocabulary.
Right. Higher vocabulary.
Yes. Awesome.
So just like she said, make sure that you're teaching all of these interleavingly. Simultaneously, and other fun words that you want to throw in there that are synonyms for those.
And I would say the biggest misunderstanding with this is that, and I certainly had a misunderstanding about this when I first started learning these Big 5, is that I thought phonemic awareness needed to be taught first.
Right, in steps.
And then phonics. But research has started to show that kids do better when you teach phonemic awareness along with the letters.
Yes, because it's a whole picture thing. Yeah. And I remember reading, and I can't remember exactly where, but it was really interesting to me because it was talking about how children learn to read in different levels and at different speeds, and how their brain just needs to make different connections, right? And so children who learn how to read slower just need to make more connections for them to have that strong hold to where they don't forget it. And so teaching them all of those things in the grand picture of things gives them the ability to make those connections faster.
That's a good point. Yes. So we're going to talk about phonemic awareness, and then we're going to talk about how you can tie it, interleave it, into phonics.
Oh, I love it.
Okay. So phonemic awareness. The main big things that you can and should be teaching kids. The most obvious one is rhyming. I one time had somebody say, we teach phonemic awareness. We do nursery rhymes, right? Well, nursery rhymes have rhyming, and that can be considered helpful to phonemic awareness, but it's not actually teaching phonemic awareness.
But let's talk about how you can do rhyming while incorporating phonemic awareness. Because a lot of people, when you say you can rhyme, you just go, hey, kiddo, give me a word that rhymes with cat.
Right. And some kids can naturally go, oh, bat, sat, mat. And other kids, they don't even really know what rhyming is. And so they might be throwing out stuff and they don't know.
Right. So
some kids have a really hard time with
it. The first thing to understand is that rhyming is this same vowel ending sound, right? You have the same vowel sound and same ending sound. It doesn't mean it's spelled exactly the same. It means it sounds.
Do you want some technical jargon?
Yes, technical jargon, please.
So the onset part of a word is the part of a word that comes before the first vowel.
Right.
So it could just be one letter. Like if you have cat, the onset is k.
Right.
And then you get to the vowel a. But if you say you have a word like spray, right?
Then the
onset is spur, right? And then so each word is made up of onset and rhyme.
Yes.
Onset is the part that comes before the rhyme. And the rhyme, and this is rhyme actually spelled different than rhyming words. It's spelled R-I-M-E.
Okay.
That's what the part of the word is, and it's the vowel to the end. And so when you're rhyming words, R-H, Y-M-E. Did I spell it
Yes,
right?
R-H-Y-M-E.
Yeah, Y-M-E. Then you're picking words that have the same rhyme part of the word.
Okay, I follow.
So
I like it. I like learning something new.
Okay,
Thank you for your
cool.
technical jargon.
So
a way to teach rhyming phonetic or with phonemic awareness is with tapping out the sounds, right? So, for example, if you say cat, you would have them touch their first 3 fingers to their thumb and go at 1 finger at a time for each sound. Then you would say, okay, now say cat, but instead of say
yeah,
and have them change that at. Now what word do you have? Mat.
And actually, some kids are really good at that, but some kids would not be able to actually do that because they don't have phonemic awareness skill enough to be able to take the book out. And so actually, this is where you can tie phonemic awareness in with letters and sounds.
Yes.
Because if they know the sounds already, research is starting to show that they can actually catch on to phonemic awareness faster if you're using the letters. So that's how you interleave the phonics in with the thing, because the phonics is actually, phonemic awareness is hearing the sounds. Phonics is seeing them and connecting them to letters. But you can do it all together. Some people think it's not phonemic awareness if you're using letters, but it's still phonemic awareness if you're manipulating the sound. So if you're taking cat and you have that, and you actually use a letter C-A-T, C-A-T, and then you take away the k and put in the M. So if they're, you can ask them to do it orally, but if they can't do it orally,
then do it visually.
Use that, they can still see it, and then their brain will catch on to it easier.
Yes.
And so they'll have it. That's interleaving it in between. So rhyming is one important thing, and that's a fun way. You can do games and songs, and rhyming is so fun, and especially with little kids. So many fun rhyming things, and maybe we'll have an episode about that sometime. But another thing is being able to isolate the sounds, which we just talked about, like taking that cat and isolating the k, at, at, and then taking the at. But also, so often when we do isolation with kids, we think it's just the first sound.
Right.
But please don't mistake that. Don't take away the kids' opportunities to learn the other sound and learning to isolate the ending sound, right?
Right.
So tell about your chopping thing that you do with your class.
Okay, so for me, because ending
sound.
Yes, the final sound, right? Which can be super difficult for kids to do. Beginning sound
Very
usually
hard.
comes pretty easy, but the ending sound is hard. So I always tell them the ending sound is the sound that stops the word. That's when the word stops, and then you're going to start a new word, right? So I teach them that, and then I teach them to chop. So we say the word, for example, cat. And I go, okay, when we're done saying the word, we're going to chop. We're going to hit our hand, on our other hand, right? And so I go, okay, cat. What sound did you chop on? T. That's the ending sound.
Right. And what I would do is I would have them, and I got this from Heggerty, so I don't want to take credit for it. They have like a hand movements for it. And so you'd move your arm across your body and then punch out the last sound. So cat. So there are different ways to do this, and you can do
your own.
But having those ways to help them find that. And then vowel sound is another one that you can help them isolate, and it's really hard. The kids somehow they have such a hard time pulling that.
But please demonstrate like what you do to isolate the vowel sound.
Okay, so in my class, my first graders are really big on helping them isolate the vowel sounds. Yes. So I've taught them the vowel sound, and we're gonna have a whole episode on vowels. Yes. So we'll talk about this. But the vowel sound is the sound that opens your mouth. So I have them put their hands on their face and feel which sound opens their mouth. So I might say, just going with cat again, like I'll say, okay, tell me the vowel sound in cat. And they all put their hands on their cheeks and they go, cat. And I tell them, stop when your mouth is open. So cat. Okay, what sound is the vowel sound? And they say, ah, right?
Right.
So then they learn that that's the vowel sound. So those are methods to help them learn to pull those out. Some kids you can say, tell me the vowel sound in cat, and they can go, ah. They don't even have to automatically. But taking them through these baby steps can really be helpful.
Yep.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about PA. So isolating, rhyming, segmenting, which is breaking them apart. We like to tap out the sounds or take a bear or a magnet or something and put something for every sound. So cat, k, at, tapping them out. One sound for each. One tap for each sound helps them to segment. But then blending is also a really important part of this. And this is one that you also can interleave really well with phonics because you have them sound out a word, at, And then you say it fast.
Yep.
And they go, cat. Now, some kids have a really hard time with this. And
Right.
this is something that in the very first episode, I told about helping my daughter learn to read. And this is something she had a really hard time with. And I kind of determined, and I don't know, this isn't science, but from my observation, it seemed to me that her brain was working so hard to remember the sounds that she couldn't, once she moved on to the next sound, she couldn't retain the first sound.
Yep.
So she'd go, and then she'd get on to the next one and she'd be like, ah, and then she'd forget.
Mm-hmm.
And then so when I'd say it fast, she had no idea.
Right.
So what I did to help her with that is then I would say the sounds. I'd say, okay, watch me. At. Now say fast. And she could do it then. Because she wasn't the one doing the hard work.
Yes.
She had just heard me say at. And so she could say it fast. So you might have to do some of those things to help them get better and better. And as they get to know the sounds better and better, they'll be able to retain them in their brains faster. And that's what I found. So.
Yes.
Okay, that's a lot on phonemic awareness. And phonics, there isn't a whole lot more to say. What do you want to say about phonics?
Phonics is just matching sounds to graphemes, right? And being able to decipher.
What's a grapheme?
The picture of the letter.
Right, but not all graphemes are one letter,
right? Some of them have more. And
so
I mean, some graphemes, diagraphs like SH, CH,
those are common ones.
Right. And then you have, the irregular ones where like the vowel teams, irregular vowels, AY says A, things like that. Right.
Lots of them.
So
there's lots and lots of them.
Yes. So it's just the picture for the sound, is the grapheme.
That's a grapheme.
So matching sounds to graphemes and orthographic patterns, which is being able to pick up, AY says A. So every time I see AY, I'm going to say that A sound, right? It's picking up that pattern.
Some brains do orthographic mapping better. And we'll have an episode about the brain.
Yes.
Because that's going to be really important. But there's a certain part of the left side of the brain, the back, that's responsible for orthographic mapping. And kids who are dyslexic, they found that part of their brain is not being triggered or whatever when they do imaging, and that they're compensating with those parts of their brain. Yeah. So, but some kids, they pick up on those patterns. They see SH and they automatically know it says shh
instead of sounding it out.
Yes. Right. Every time. So some kids still, even when you teach them, SH says shh, they see S and H and they go first.
Yep.
So, those are orthographic patterns. Yeah. And just once they know so many sounds, once they know 2 sounds, you can start blending.
As soon as possible.
Yeah. And that all brings it back to the phonics.
Yep. So then after they have their phonics and they're starting to blend, then you work on, fluency, right? Which is reading with speed, accuracy, and
you can start that right from the beginning. When you have, 2 words, she sat, she sat. She sat. You can practice reading in different ways to help them. And then, we do a lot of data, as they get to where they're reading stories, even the smallest of stories, have them practice reading them more than once.
Yeah.
To practice that fluency.
Yep.
Rereading is actually a really great way to teach fluency.
Yes.
So
absolutely. The next one is vocabulary. This one is the number 1 predictor of school success. So teaching vocabulary is so important because it gives those kids that background knowledge and it helps them understand.
And we talked about this a lot in our last episode when we talked about talking to your child and reading with your child so that they can get words, that you can give them words.
Yep.
And our next episode, we're going to talk even more about language comprehension. So we'll touch on that a little bit more. But there are 2 ways to teach vocabulary. One is just teaching them explicitly. This word is interleaving.
Yes, like you just taught me. Yes.
And then the other way is just in context and practice. Like they hear it a lot, you're using it a lot, you're talking about it, and then they catch on. Kids catch on to words. Most words, I would say, people don't necessarily learn explicitly. They just catch on as they hear it,
and hear it being used. Yeah, right. In context.
But that's not enough. You have to teach them explicitly as well. So,
and I think it's also important to just point out super quickly that you don't want to just go, oh, this is a big word, so I need to do vocabulary on this and explain it. I think it's also important to do little vocab checks, even on simple words.
Simple words, yeah.
Because there's so many times where kids don't hear, a consonant blend like camp and cramp. And so they'll think you're saying cramp and they'll go, oh, it's when you take a tent out into the woods. And you're like, whoa. That's not what that is. And their
Yes.
whole comprehension of the story will be confused because they misunderstood what word it is.
Right. You know, I've been learning Spanish, and I find that myself,
Yeah.
doing that myself, like
Yeah.
not knowing that this word is just a little, I can't think of an example.
Just a little
right now,
different.
but I'll read something, I'll be like, that doesn't make sense because I'm thinking of the word meaning something different. And then when I realize, or even a different way that it's used, right?
Yeah.
Because they do that in every language, you know. So that's a huge thing for kids and for adults when we're learning different languages. Right. Okay.
Which leads us into comprehension
Which
and
is our very last one.
understanding.
And comprehension is so huge, but the important thing to know about comprehension is that you cannot teach comprehension. A lot of the problem that we've had through, you know, a lot of the schools is that they try to teach comprehension, like teaching strategies, like find the main idea.
Right.
You know, they've tried to teach strategies, but the truth is what they've really found about comprehension is that it's mostly based on background knowledge. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how well you can read the words if you don't have any knowledge on what you're reading. So there's a famous study called the baseball study, and we can get into that more in our episode about comprehension. But the baseball study was basically a study done in 1987 by Donna and Lauren Leslie, where they tested kids. They had kids read a passage about baseball, and they divided them into 4 categories. Kids that knew a lot about baseball and could read well. Kids who knew a lot about baseball but couldn't read well. Kids who didn't know anything about baseball but could read well, and kids who didn't know anything about baseball and didn't read well. And what they found, interestingly enough, is that, and then they had them read the passage, and then they had to like create a diagram of the game and the story, so they had to kind of show their comprehension. The kids who knew a lot about baseball and could read well, they obviously did the best. But the kids who could read well but didn't know anything about baseball didn't do any better than the kids who didn't know anything about baseball and couldn't read well. So it didn't matter how well they could read. Yep. It didn't matter at all how well they could read. It mattered how much they knew about baseball. Yeah. And the kids who did know a lot about baseball but couldn't read well did better than the good readers.
Isn't that fascinating?
So it's all about background knowledge. If you have the background knowledge on this topic, I mean, we all know, if you've ever tried to read a scientific journal about something that you don't know anything about, like, it doesn't matter if you can read the words, you cannot understand or comprehend what's going on.
Right. I think it's good. I think, because we're just going to wrap up.
Yeah.
But I think we should end with this wonderful quote from Sharon Vaughn.
Okay. You can't teach comprehension. If you teach decoding vocabulary and background knowledge correctly, comprehension is free.
And I just love that because it's so important. So great.
So, but I just have a little quick question before we close this up.
Yeah.
That just occurred to me that maybe some people might be thinking, they're like, well, if you can't teach comprehension, then why is it one of the big 5?
Oh, good question. Because it's important.
I think
it's making sure that you're setting them up for success.
Exactly. And you can't, even though you can't teach comprehension, you can build background knowledge, knowing that that's going to help them comprehend.
Yes.
That's so important. Because if they don't have reading comprehension, they can't read.
Right. Absolutely.
So,
well, that's it for this one, for the big 5.
Yeah.
We're so excited that you guys joined us, and we're so excited that you guys are palling along with us on this wonderful journey.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, we're so excited. We hope you join us for episode 6,
which is, we're going to kind of go back and go into more detail on some of the things we've talked about in these last 2 episodes. So we're going to start episode 6 is going to be about language comprehension and talking to your child and some of the things that you can do to build that background knowledge and comprehension abilities just from this time that they're infants.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
So join us for that one.
Thank you again, and we hope you have a great day. See you next time. Bye.